2.5 years ago, I became the director of Refugee Montreal. I do not have any background in refugee academic work. All I am is a guy named Clarke, who was born in Quebec, qui est allé en école primaire en français et qui parle comme un Québécois, qui a l'air des gens qui sont au Québec. That's all I've got. At Refugee Montreal, our vision statement is compassion and justice for refugees. This is something that we developed just in the last couple of years. Short and sweet, what is our vision? If everything went the way we wanted at Refugee, what would Montreal look like? We would see compassion and justice for refugees. We've been around since 1994, so it's probably longer than many of you in the room. And we are funded by the Anglican Diocese of Montreal and the Presbyterian Church in Canada for core funding. We get other funding from some nice ladies who are called Catholic Sisters, from individual churches, from individuals, and from foundations. We have quite a varied array of funding, and we do not get government funding for what we do. If you're interested, our website is actionr.org. The photo there, that's us. There's three of us who do the work that we do. Vietnamese boat people from the 1970s are when most Canadians understood the word refugee and maybe were able to spell the word refugee. I was in university at the time. It was the end of the Cold War, and we saw images like this. Do these look like migrants? Do these look like people who were choosing to go where they were going? Not particularly. 60,000 people came to Canada from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And it was church groups, community groups, lawyer firms who sponsored these folks along with the government sponsoring. It became an issue of everybody wanted one. Who here has ever heard of Davidson, Saskatchewan? Nobody. Oh, no, somebody that you have? Okay. Davidson, Saskatchewan is a small town halfway between Regina and Saskatoon, and that's why you have never heard of it. They had a Vietnamese boat family in Davidson, Saskatchewan. That's how widespread this was in Canada. Let's just use this image to think in terms of migrant and refugees. So migrants are people who choose to leave where they are because they want to go, because they want a better life. It may be for economics, it may be because of a political system, it may be because they've fallen in love with somebody, or they assume they're going to have better prospects. A refugee is someone who has forced migration. So a very quick example, how many of you are from out of town? How many people? Oh, wait. Did you migrate? Most of you probably migrated willingly to Montreal. Okay? Maybe some of you wish you weren't are here, but most of you, it was voluntary migration. So let's assume that you decide after university that you're going to Los Angeles. So you'll prepare about going to Los Angeles. You'll figure out how you can legally work there. How much does it cost? What are all the implications? What do I sell here in Montreal? And maybe it'll take a few years, but you make it there because it's planned. How many people here have blonde hair? What if, as of today, blonde hair made you persecuted? That people would come up to you and say, get out of town. You can't live here anymore. You make me feel unsafe, or we don't like you guys. And what if you don't even have blonde hair? You have dark hair. But your mother had blonde hair, and everybody knows your mother had blonde hair, and said, well, you got to leave too, because we know in your family there's blonde hair. That's forced migration. So people leave very quickly. They can't necessarily sell what they own. It's not planned, and away we go. So that's the difference between a migrant and a refugee. And certainly, we hear the words often. A refugee is, on some level, a migrant. A refugee who comes to Canada is an immigrant. But not every immigrant is a refugee. So I think it's important to have the notion of voluntary and involuntary. Something that happened in the 1976 Immigration Act is people could be sponsored. So lots of people got sponsored in the Vietnam era. And frankly, 3 years ago, on my last day at the bank, if you had asked me, does that still happen? I would have said no. I would have guessed that refugee sponsorship ended with the Vietnamese folks, but that's not true. It continues to happen, and there are about 100 organizations similar to Action Refugee Montreal all across Canada. There's about 10 to 12 in Quebec who will help people have refugee sponsorship. Now, it may be, in the main case, if somebody has a brother or a brother-in-law or a cousin who's in a refugee situation. The picture at the top, your eyes haven't gone wonky, it's supposed to look like that. The lady on the left is the first lady I met the week that I started at work. The lady on the left sponsored the lady in the middle, who's her cousin. They're from Eritrea. And she was so excited to come and meet us at the office because she'd been reunited with her cousin. And she said, Mr. Paul, anytime you want me to come and talk, you call me. You're the salesperson and I'm the product. I will go anywhere you want. Schools, churches, whatever, I will go with you. So about a month later, so I took a picture. And a month later, I called her and said, I'm going out on Sunday. I don't need you to come. Can I bring you a picture? And she said, are there going to be any Eritreans there? And I said, well, it's a Presbyterian church in a place called Beaconsfield, Quebec. The chances are low. And she said, okay, you can use my picture, but if there's any Eritreans there, I don't want them to see my picture. So even though she had been here herself for 17 years, she was worried about what was happening, anybody seeing her picture and getting it back home. So that's a typical kind of refugee sponsorship. You have family reunification. The second photo you see, this is from the Presbyterian Record. This is a family who was sponsored by a Presbyterian congregation in Point Clarke. As you might imagine, anybody who comes to Quebec has to integrate into French schooling, into the French world. So it's a little bit challenging sometimes for Anglophone church groups to integrate Francophone people, but it can be done. So these are ways that some sponsorship can happen, either family sponsorship or groups such as this. So we have that program. We have another program called Jumelage. This is a twinning program where we have accepted refugee women who are matched with a Montreal resident to reduce isolation, because you can imagine if you come to Montreal and you're now on welfare and you don't know too many people and nobody is giving you a break and letting you have a job, what kind of apartment do you get? A small one. And you don't get out too often. And so the Jumelage program, which we have, is to help reduce isolation, help people make connections. The image on the left, this was at Christmas, so the lady on the right invited her jumelle to her family event at Christmas. The other image here we have is at a group event where we have 15, 20 people come together and have a community kitchen. On October the 25th, they're going to carve pumpkins. It's a very Canadian, Quebec kind of a thing, but people from Cameroon haven't necessarily done that before. So we try and integrate them into Canadian society. The detention center. Any of you ever seen this building? Not too likely. This is a building in northeast Laval where all the prisons are. I call it Prison Alley. There's all kinds of prisons there. People who come into Canada and the Canada Border Services Agency isn't sure who they are, they put in handcuffs, put in a van, and brought here. Now most of you have probably gone into the airport and you show your passport and the nice people with the badge let you in the country. If they're not sure who you are, this is where you go. So we visit at Refugee Montreal that particular location. We have one of our employees who's been doing this for 10 years, and we have law and social work interns, so people in third-year law can apply to be interns, and we go visit the people there. It started with my predecessor, who was Presbyterian minister, who would go on Sunday afternoons and just kind of visit with people and pray with them and just help them on a moral sense or on a morale sense. But as the laws have become more complicated, we realize we need to give legal information. And so we go in and we have English language, all kinds of dictionaries. We make sure people understand why they are being held and how they might be able to get out. And we give the simplest thing possible, we give a long-distance phone card worth $2.50. And so if anybody ever thinks $2.50 doesn't mean anything, we were talking earlier about a dollar at the Syrian kids thing, $2.50 can change somebody's life because they can act, as you might imagine, in the prison facility, it's not called a prison, that's what we call it, you can make local phone calls. But the last time we looked, Sri Lanka, Iran, Afghanistan were all long distance. And so you need a long distance phone calling card. And so we give things worth $2.50. There was one time a guy showed up at our office and he had a thank you card for Jamie, my colleague, and a thank you card for the office. And she didn't remember him. And he said, wow, you gave me 2 calling cards. We spent $5 on this guy and it changed his life. Because he was able to get his identity documents, he was able to get his get out of jail free card, and be accepted as a refugee. So we've been doing this for 20 years. The image on the left, just so you understand, if people come to Canada and make a refugee claim, they end up having a hearing down at 200 West. And it's a little hearing room like this. And this is an image from Citizenship and Immigration website, which I find kind of interesting because it has, at the back, you've got the commissioner, you have the CBSA person, you have the lawyer, you have the refugee person, and a little person sitting there on the right, that's us at Refugee. I don't know why they have that image, but we are allowed to go in and sit in. We're not allowed to talk, take notes, but we sit in and listen to the hearing and just provide moral support. So those are our 3 programs. We have sponsorship, we have the jumelage, and we have detention. Now, I'm going to give you a very busy slide. I was asked to talk a little bit about, well, how is Canada doing when it comes to refugees? So, I am not an expert at this kind of stuff, but government-assisted refugees, the first line, this is where the government gets names from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and they resettle the folks here. They're called government-assisted refugees. In French, it's called réfugiés pris à charge par le gouvernement. These folks come as permanent residents, the kids go to school, they get health cards, and they get welfare. So in the last few years, you'll see that the numbers, for some reason, have been going down. Privately sponsored refugees are the ones who come through organizations such as Refugee Montreal, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Toronto, Hospitality House in Winnipeg, and so on all across the country. So the numbers there vary depending on how many people can actually make it through. When people come, it's usually after a very long wait list. We had a family come on September 11th this year, and their file was started in April 2009. Now, I don't know what you guys were doing in 2009. Some of you were probably in high school. And these folks waited 6 years to get here. That's a very long wait. The good news with the Syrian crisis is things are much more quick. We have some people who arrived yesterday. We have some people coming on Monday whose file we started last November. So the Syrians are actually coming fairly quickly in an 11-month perspective. Refugees landed in Canada, so these are the folks who had the little hearing. Those are the numbers of accepted refugees. Refugee dependents, I just took the numbers out. Blended visa office referred refugees. These are the new thing that the government's doing, where instead of the people being government-sponsored refugees, they're half sponsored by the government and half sponsored by groups like us, so it only costs half. But people who are privately sponsored arrive as permanent residents. Their kids can go to school, they get a health card, but they do not get welfare. They're not allowed welfare for the first 12 months. So whoever's sponsoring you, an individual, a church group, whatever, has to put up the money. So we do files, and let's say your brother wants to come. So we will tell you, you have to deposit with us $7,000, which we hold in trust, and then when your brother comes, we give it back to you. We give you every last dollar plus the interest. We don't charge you for the file, but you got to give money. So that's obviously a big barrier for people, and especially for the Syrian community, because guess what? They're already sending money overseas because people are in Lebanon or they're in Turkey and they're not working and they're having trouble paying their rent. So the total numbers here are in the 20-some thousands. So far in 2015 in Quebec, we have government-assisted, we're very proud of the number of government-assisted refugees who have landed in Quebec. 8. How many Syrian refugees are there? Millions. Doesn't matter how many, there's millions. So far in Quebec, we've had 8, which is, I wouldn't say it's a shame, I would say it's shameful. Privately sponsored refugees, 600. So groups like us are doing a very good job of finding people and getting them here. The important thing to remember is there's also another way to sponsor, and that's called group of 2 to 5. Okay? The way to group of 2 to 5 is if 5 people here have enough financial capacity, they can sponsor somebody they know and have them come over. So since September, this is the big thing that's come into play. On September the 2nd, I left work at 5:30, and everything was normal. I got to work on September the 3rd after the image of the young lad in Turkey. I have a grandson who's turned 3 2 days ago, and my son said, you know, that little boy, he doesn't just look like your grandson, he even dresses like your grandson. And I think what happened is everybody heard that this child had family in Canada. They tried to somehow sponsor, whether it was that family or another family group. They could have come to Canada, and somehow it didn't work. And that outraged everybody. And the phone started ringing September the 3rd in my office, and it has not stopped since. We've got new phones, we've added phone lines, because we can't cope. I got called by every news organization that day. I was on ABNE that night, I was on CJD in the morning, and I was everywhere. Did you know people watch news at 7:30 on Sunday morning? I had to go and do that on ABNE. But what happened is everybody was calling it. The first guy to call us to help was a guy named Monsieur Tremblay in a place called Berthierville, which I've never heard of. It's a paradise between Montreal and Three Rivers. And he called. He says, I've got an apartment. I've got a factory. I want to sponsor Syria. I want to do something. And the next call, somebody named McDougall, they walked into our office and says, I want to help a Syrian. And she starts explaining how big her apartment is and how many people can stay in her apartment. There was an outpouring of generosity by the Canadian public that was unexpected and just amazing, and it really hasn't stopped since. So a lot of people want to sponsor a Syrian, but then we explain it's not couch surfing for 2 weeks. You are responsible for 1 year for everything for these folks. And as you mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily easy for a Syrian to come to Quebec. Just the weather can be a problem. Language can be a problem. Having accreditation for your work is a problem. So a lot of people have understood, well, maybe I shouldn't be sponsoring somebody, but I can give money somewhere. And we are so blessed at Refugee. We've had money from people who we've never heard of because they heard me on radio, they saw something in the newspaper about us. So we're actually hiring somebody new. We have a job offer. We have gone from, in 2013, 1 person 1 day a week doing sponsorship to 2 people full time. And we've been given money from foundations to do this. People, usually you have to ask foundations for money and they say no. In this case, I had 2 foundations call me and say, would you like some money? If we gave you money, could you do something? So this is an amazing turnaround, and we've been very, very, very lucky with this. The problem is, as I said, that the government-sponsored refugees are taking their time to get here. Very rapid summary of what we do. What can you do to people in the room? You can contact a local NGO who does settlement work and volunteer. There were only 8 government-assisted refugees, but there are more coming. Trust me, there are going to be thousands of people coming, or even the 600 who are sponsored by groups like us. These folks are going to need help. So if you want to do something, look in your neighborhood or somewhere, some NGO that helps. There's going to be needs with kids, there's going to be need for health, etc. You can organize a fundraiser for NGOs helping refugees. You can have the Syrian Kids Foundation, which is fine. We had somebody call us and say, we're having some event at something called the Catacomb. You probably know about it more than me. It's at the corner of Ontario and Saint Laurent here. And they're having a fundraiser for us. They're going to give us money to help. What? I think it's great. I'm not going. I'm prepared to something. But that's something that can be done to organize fundraisers for different groups. You can contact people at the political level. By the way, I have this yellow and black thing. This is not an Amnesty International button. This says proud to protect refugees. It just happens to be the same colors. Amnesty International is very big on having you sign stuff. Sign stuff with Amnesty International. Be it this for Amnesty International, the Francophone division, sent out an email yesterday to everybody in their inbox. Sign stuff. Get in touch with people at the political level. Write letters. Write letters to people at the political level. Counter untruths if they appear. I don't know how much you guys come across things that aren't true on Facebook. Something about refugees getting more money than seniors, and maybe seniors should apply to be refugees. If you see that, has anybody seen that thing? Okay, a few of you. That's a misunderstood letter to the editor to the Toronto Star in 2004. Things that are untrue can go around for a very, very long time. And whenever I see this somehow, I go back. I ended up sending a Facebook message to some guy in Holland who I said, stop this. Why are you doing it? He doesn't answer. I've sent him 3 messages. I guess he doesn't understand English, but he posted something. But I counter untruth wherever I see it. So if you see something that's untrue, please counter it. Try to get opinion pieces published, whether it's in McGill things, Concordia things, anywhere. That's what I would suggest. So these are some ideas of how you can be involved, or you can give your money to me. Thank you.